From ABC in New York, this is World News Tonight, Sunday, with Sam Donaldson.
Good evening. The U.S. Embassy in Tehran has been invaded and occupied by Iranian students. The Americans inside have been taken prisoner, and according to a student spokesman, will be held as hostages until the deposed Shah is returned from the United States, where he's receiving medical treatment for cancer. Some reports say as many as 90 Americans may be involved. Others say as few as 35. A look at what has happened in Tehran, as narrated by Richard Anderson.
The American hostages were blindfolded, handcuffed, and marched out on the U.S. Embassy's front steps by the revolutionary students. The Iranians had fought U.S. Marine guards for 3 hours for control of the embassy. The Marines used tear gas, but were eventually overrun at 5 o'clock this morning, New York time, as revolutionary guards and local police stood by and watched. While the Iranians burned an American flag in front of the embassy, they said the takeover had the express blessing of the Ayatollah Khomeini. In return for their American hostages' freedom, they're demanding the United States give up the deposed Shah of Iran from his hospital bed in New York to stand trial before a people's court. Until that is done, the demonstrators refuse to make any promises about the fate of the American hostages. Immediately after the takeover, the crowd put up pictures of the Ayatollah and a banner identifying themselves as Khomeini followers. Iranian women wearing the traditional black chadors could be seen inside the compound gate. Outside, newsmen and women waited for any information. But one fact is clear tonight, that for the second time in a year, Khomeini demonstrators in Tehran have overrun the American embassy and now appear in control of as many as 90 American lives. Richard Anderson, ABC News.
The action against the embassy may or may not have been ordered by Iran's religious leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini. That is not clear, but it does appear to have his blessing. A spokesman in the holy city of Qom said the move has the Ayatollah's personal support, which adds to Washington's difficulty in trying to resolve this dangerous situation. Ted Koppel, our diplomatic correspondent, is standing by at the State Department with the latest on that. Ted?
The State Department is doing what it can, but for the moment at least, that doesn't appear to be much. There has been no direct contact with the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. That building is under the total control of the demonstrators. During the takeover, by coincidence, the senior American diplomat in Iran, Bruce Langan, the charge d'affaires, was at the foreign ministry. He has remained there throughout the day, acting as Washington's main link to the Iranian government. The State Department has set up a special task force in a small room next to the operations center. The force is headed by Assistant Secretary of State Harold Saunders. But Secretary of State Vance himself came in this morning, stayed until early afternoon, and twice briefed President Carter, who's up at Camp David, by phone. So far, official comments about the incident have been a model of restraint, an expression of concern for the safety of American personnel and property, and a statement of appreciation that the Iranian government has made some efforts to resolve the matter. Sam?
Ted, the Ayatollah's support for this action is ominous, is it not?
Well, it may or may not be ominous. The State Department is making a particular point to distinguish the Ayatollah Khomeini from the Iranian government. That's why it's being so restrained in its direct references to the government.
It seems to me this is another situation where a lot of people's first instinct might be to use military force, but apparently Washington is not going to do that.
Well, first of all, it probably wouldn't work, Sam, and secondly, in one word, oil. Washington is tremendously concerned about Iran's oil supplies and our need for them, and of course concerned about the safety of those Americans still at the embassy.
Thank you very much, Ted. Here in New York, where the Shah is undergoing chemotherapy treatment for cancer, Iranian students chained themselves to the Statue of Liberty and unfurled banners demanding that the Shah be returned to Iran for punishment. The demonstrators were cut loose by police and taken into custody. In the Central American country of El Salvador, the leftist fight against the new military junta there intensified this week. A report on the situation from Stephen Gear.
The streets of San Salvador became decidedly unsafe this past week. In this capital city of the tiny but heavily populated nation of El Salvador, episodes of violence took the lives of more than 40 persons and wounded more than 100. Most of the casualties occurred in two clashes between armed leftist demonstrators and National Guardsmen. In another incident, a socialist group attacked the U.S. Embassy. 2 U.S. Marines were wounded. One was nicked in the ear by a .45 caliber bullet.
We were throwing gas and they were shooting bullets. There's no doubt.
Thursday night, in a television broadcast, the five-man junta that came to power on October 15th appealed to the nation for patience. The junta, consisting of 2 colonels and 3 civilians, ousted rightist President Carlos Humberto Romero and promised democratic reform.
The alternative is really terrible. It's a civil war with thousands and thousands of people killed and bloodshed.
Funerals and burials of demonstrators killed last week are being used as political rallies by the 3 major leftist groups, which so far have failed to form a united front. This funeral demonstration here in El Salvador is only a symbol of the problems that plague this country. This is not yet a nation in revolution, but it is a nation that seems to be working itself towards a revolution. Stephen Gear, ABC News, San Salvador, El Salvador.
Last Wednesday morning, while on his way to El Salvador to help cover that story, ABC producer Ken Lukoff was killed in a Mexico City plane crash. Today, Lukoff's funeral was held in his hometown of Milwaukee. His family and friends gathered to hear him described as a producer who was often called to cover difficult stories and always did his best. Lukoff was buried in Mount Zion Cemetery. His death at 31 was a deep loss to his friends at ABC and to the news business. Police in Greensboro, North Carolina are looking for 2 more men who may have taken part in yesterday's violent clash at a rally against the Ku Klux Klan. 12 other suspects, all white men, are being charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of 4 anti-Klan demonstrators. No doubt about it, the 1980 presidential race is on. But hold on, there are still elections to be held this year, on Tuesday, in fact. Sander Van Oker has a rundown on the most interesting contests.
The governor's race in Kentucky asks the question, can a Kentucky Fried Chicken millionaire named John Y. Brown, aided by a famous wife named Phyllis George, and a famous friend named Edward Kennedy, plus a slick television and organizational blitz, come from nowhere in a few months' time and beat an old political pro like one-time Republican Governor Louis B. Nunn? If you believe the polls, the answer appears to be yes. In Mississippi, the Democrats again appear to have the edge, as former Lieutenant Governor William Winter, making his 3rd bid for governor, is depending on a good turnout of traditional Democratic voters to help him beat moderate Republican Gil Carmichael. In California, 2 issues, busing and budgets. Proposition 1 would limit the power of state judges to order school busing programs. Also, Proposition 4.
Why is Proposition 4 so important?
I think Prop 4 is a very essential follow-up to Proposition 13.
This is what we need.
It's up to you, or for California, in the spirit of 13.
Proposition 4 would limit state budgets to annual increases equal to the change in the cost of living and population increases. Also in California, a hot mayor's race in San Francisco. In the nonpartisan race, the battle is really between incumbent Dianne Feinstein and challenger Quentin Kopp. In Cleveland, Mayor Dennis Kucinich, who barely survived a recall election 14 months ago, is seeking re-election.
How are you, George Voinovich? I'd like to be your mayor.
He faces a tough challenge from Republican Lieutenant Governor George Voinovich. In Boston, where the election is nonpartisan, Mayor Kevin White is seeking an unprecedented 4th term. He battles State Senator Joseph Timilty. Racial tension may be a factor. In Philadelphia, Democrat William Green, whose father once ran the local Democratic organization, appears to have the edge over Republican David Marston, a former U.S. attorney. Consumer Party candidate Lucian Blackwell may take black votes away from Green.
Sandy, is there anything that's going to happen this Tuesday that may tell us something about the 1980 presidential race?
One thing, Sam. If Bill Green wins in Philadelphia, he'll probably be for Kennedy. There are 2 big political machines left in this country, Chicago and Philadelphia. Well, Kennedy got the beneficiary of Mayor Burns' endorsement last week, and in Philadelphia, Green will probably help Kennedy in the April primary, just as his father, the late Bill Green, helped Jack Kennedy in 1960 carry Pennsylvania.
Thank you very much, Sandy. And just think, the presidential election itself will be held exactly 1 year from today, November 4th, 1980. Can you wait? It is not another church council to revise theology and doctrine, but in some ways, a meeting that begins at the Vatican tomorrow is even more unusual. Pope John Paul II has called a Congress of Cardinals of the Roman Catholic Church to suggest ways he can improve the day-to-day administration of the church, a discussion no pope has invited in the last 500 years. More from Bill Blakemore.
This weekend, cardinals from all over the world have been gathering here in Rome, as they did for the 2 papal elections a year ago. A year ago, a number of the non-Italian cardinals said, "It's a pity we only gather to talk when a pope dies." Now, everyone's been invited back by one of those non-Italian cardinals, Karol Wojtyła, the man they all elected pope. They're here for a week of discussions about church problems, including any issues the cardinals want to bring up from the floor.
The Holy Father is looking for information from people who, in a way, are carrying the heat and the burden of the day. He gets a great volume of information, but this is a little different.
The cardinals will meet with the Pope here in this modern conference hall inside Vatican City. The agenda here reportedly includes assessing the Pope's first year, discussing the role of the central Vatican bureaucracy, and discussing Vatican finances. The Pope's first year has shown his ability to win approval from crowds, as here today at his regular Sunday blessing. His ability to communicate with the international leaders of his church will be tested at this week's meetings with the cardinals, of whom less than a quarter are Italian, meetings which many of them feel should become a regular, even an annual affair. Bill Blakemore, ABC News, in Vatican City.
While the church sustains many people in dark hours, some prison inmates in South Carolina have found new meaning for their lives through children. Julie Eckert has the story.
Sam, this is Kirkland State Penitentiary. Overcrowded cells, barbed wire fences, vicious dogs. Big Bird. Wait a minute, Big Bird? Yes, inside these prison walls, there's a room called Sesame Street, where television puppets appear in real life. Big Bird, Cookie Monster, Oscar the Grouch. Why would a prison have a Sesame Street? Hundreds of children come to Kirkland every week, children of prisoners, here to visit their fathers. Since Mom and Dad need some time for private talks, the children may spend hours alone, bored and restless. Now they have friends.
Hi, boys and girls.
Big Bird is really T.C. Jenkins, serving 8 years for robbery. Sesame Street is run by inmates, members of the prison chapter of the JCs.
It gives you a chance to get out of the prison environment. It gives you the chance to contact with people that really need you.
These men, convicted of breaking the law, now teach the children not to.
What we need to do, though, is to learn to respect other people's property. So
their lessons aren't just thrown together. Inmate tutors have gotten training from a nearby university and from the folks at the original Sesame Street. Inmates who want to be tutors are carefully screened.
There are men in this program that are serving life for murder, and I have no qualms whatsoever leaving my 4-year-old with them.
What did you learn today, kids?
I learned what I learned.
You might expect a project like this to be one more drain on the tax dollar. You're right. Sesame Street at Kirkland hasn't cost the public a dime. The inmates not only built this room with their own hands, they raised the $6,000 to pay for it. The National JCs recently named it the best project in the country, in or out of prison.
it really makes you feel happy to see the kids happy. I can leave here today, or tomorrow, knowing that I have, accomplished something.
Their accomplishments have now been set to music. The inmates wrote the song and spent a day on the outside recording it.
Your heart will break, your family's made. Without hope, you just can't exist.
You can't fool children. And adults judge you for where you've been and what you are and your past and oh, he's this and that. But children just see you for what you are now and how you relate to them. And that's really what's important. This program has not only changed the children, it's changed the men.
Julie Eckert, ABC News, Columbia, South Carolina.
Most of the time when people in Washington are running, it's for office. But today, the Capitol was the scene for a marathon of another kind, sponsored by the Marines. Dan Lovett has details. Dan?
Some very heavy drinking in D.C. this day, Sam, as those who made the run through the monuments consumed over 150,000 cups of water en route to the finish. 6,473 bolted away 9 o'clock this morning in the shadow of the Iwo Jima Memorial. Along the 26-mile route, the runners enjoying many of the landmarks of the nation's capital. There he is, the winner, Navy Lieutenant Phil Kemp, Pensacola, Florida, capturing the Washington race, 2 hours, 19 minutes, 35 seconds. Best time among the women today was turned in by Joanna Martin, who crossed the line in 2 hours, 58 minutes, and 6 seconds.
The pomp, pageantry, and elegance of the equestrian world. Not exactly the type of sport you'd expect to find packing the stands at Madison Square Garden. But during one of the programs this week at the National Horse Show, there were many people sitting on the edge of their seats.
This event, the Puissance, draws the largest crowds to a horse show because it has all the elements of action and risk like other sports. It is a test of strength to clear a 7-foot wall. An event some riders say takes less skill and is of more thrill.
No doubt about it. The thrills and spills will make the public turn the public on, and I think to see something try to set a new record.
The Flying Dutchman on course now with Dutch Crown.
Maybe it is thrills and spills some of the spectators want to see, but for 52-year-old Harry Dallaire, the galloping grandfather of the horse show circuit, it is a contest of nerve and strength to climb the Great Wall. It may be known as a gentleman's sport, but it is one in which women compete on an equal basis. 26-year-old Terry Rudd, a perfect example. She is a catch rider, meaning she rides other people's horses. Terry won the Puissance here last year. This time, however, a tougher ride.
When you're jumping that high and that wide, of course, there is a good chance of crashing. I think they love to see the crashes. You know, say an amateur who might freeze when they fall has a good chance of getting hurt.
If it takes luck to win the $5,000 Puissance Stakes, it also takes courage. Horses weigh over a half-ton, and just before they break, prior to that final jump, one wrong move can be costly.
A fast start in New Jersey for the New York Giants today. But it's the Dallas Cowboys who make the big noise at the finish. Trailing late in the fourth period, watch him work. Roger Staubach hits Drew Pearson. This beauty. Pearson drags a Giant defender with him into the end zone. The Dallas TD makes it 14-13 Giants. Here's your game winner. 6 seconds left. Raphael Septien delivers the field goal. It's the Cowboys, 16-14. Elsewhere, Pittsburgh introduced the Redskins to the reality of the NFL. Steelers take it 38-7. Bradshaw, 4 TD tosses. Denver leading New Orleans in the fourth quarter. Atlanta 17-14 over Tampa Bay. New England bags Buffalo 26-6. Baltimore coming back. It's 38-28 over Cincinnati today. The rookie Otis Anderson rushing for 160 yards in the 37-7 St. Louis win over Minnesota. San Diego, a 2014 winner over Kansas City. The Jets are leading Green Bay late fourth period. Chicago working on Detroit real good late in the fourth period. Los Angeles with a 24-0 lead over Seattle fourth chapter. Oakland and San Francisco in the battle by the Bay. It's the Raiders 23-10 fourth quarter. Cleveland remains in the playoff picture by way of its 24-19 win over Philadelphia. And yes, Harold Carmichael of the Eagles caught a pass in his 106th consecutive game that establishes a new NFL record. Tomorrow night, before the ABC cameras, it's the Houston Oilers against the Dolphins in Miami.
Will Rogers, the great American humorist, was born 100 years ago today in Claremore, Oklahoma. We wanted some thoughts to mark the occasion from someone suitable. Despite the fact that Hughes Rudd is a little younger and was born across the border in Texas, we called on him to do it. Hughes?
Well, Sam, he started out as an Oklahoma cowboy, and he never lost that image. His daddy owned the ranch and said that Will would never amount to anything as a cowhand, though. because he was more interested in doing rope tricks and telling jokes than in punching cows. So he became Will Rogers the Entertainer, a headliner in Broadway shows and the movies, a newspaper columnist, a friend of presidents and politicians, even though he mocked them unmercifully. He used to say, when I make a joke, it's harmless. When Congress makes a joke, it becomes a law. Presidents fared no better. This was Rogers on Calvin Coolidge, one of the dullest presidents this country has ever had.
He was just a man we needed. He didn't do nothing, but that's what we wanted done.
Rogers flourished in the hard time days of the Depression, getting rich, talking about how broke we all were. The one-time cowboy could indulge his passion for polo with movie stars. But he kept the common touch in public, and he taught us to laugh at ourselves when the Great Depression didn't leave us much to laugh at. When he was killed in a plane crash in Alaska in 1935, the country went into shock. In retrospect, it seems that no public figure's death so saddened the United States until the murder of President Kennedy. We have had and will have other presidents. There was only one Will Rogers. He used to be fond of saying, I never met a man I didn't like. And considering the number of politicians he met, that may have been one of the funniest of all of his lines, Sam.
Thank you, Hughes. That's our report tonight. I'm Sam Donaldson. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
From New York, this has been World News Tonight, Sunday. ABC's World News Tonight is where news happens. Join Frank Reynolds, Max Robinson, Barbara Walters, and Peter Jennings weeknights on ABC.